What's going on, everybody? We are back for another episode of the ABJ Podcast, episode 86. Super excited for this one. One of the first, well, not the first, because we had HC Loke on, who had a run with ECW and ROH and had some stuff on WWE with some extra work. But this is when it comes to the WWE side of things. This is a good one for us. I'm excited. My guest here has been a commentator, a ring announcer, has been in the business for quite some time, and has taken up the role of trainer, coach, mentor, as well as promoter at Three Legacies Professional Wrestling. We'll get into that in 1 minute. I will let them do their introduction. But guys, let's talk about Suplex Vintage Wrestling. It has finally happened. A whole store fully dedicated to vintage, vintage wrestling. They said it can never be done, but I have seen it with my own eyes. Suplex Vintage Wrestling is a store curated for wrestling fans by wrestling fans. Located in Queens Village, their store features this largest selection of vintage wrestling under one roof. Their selection includes classic designs featuring your favorite wrestlers from the Golden Age, Attitude Era, Internationals, Indies, and more. And if you're tired of watching premium live events at home, SVW hosts the best watch party since your friend Kyle's birthday party since you were 12. And if church and watch parties aren't your thing, then let's not forget about their selections of figures, replica belts, trading cards, and from their t-shirts and hats to rare wrestling memorabilia, they have something for every wrestling enthusiast out there. So what are you waiting for? Check them out at suplex.svw on Instagram or at suplex.svw.com and let them satisfy your pro wrestling nostalgia needs. Huge thank you to those guys for keeping the podcast afloat, being a great sponsor, and helping us keep this train moving. Without further ado, let me bring in my guest, Ricardo Rodriguez.
Damas y caballeros, my name is Ricardo Rodriguez. I am happy to be here tonight.
Hola, I love that. I know a little bit of Spanish, so you said yes, yes, yes. Sorry.
That's what counts. That's what counts. I'm this guy. So yeah, man, I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm super excited for this. I've been hitting the Duolingo up, so I'm getting a little better. You know what I mean?
All right. Yeah. No, it's very beneficial to be multilingual, especially in the US, which is very multicultural. So it definitely helps.
Absolutely. So yeah, man, we have a lot to dive in here tonight. Huge thank you once again for doing this. Now you're in our neck of the woods here in Pennsylvania. We're super happy to have you. Been absolutely killing it on the wrestling scene, when it's actually getting in the ring and showing people that you can work, and you're more than just the ring announcer commentary, but also running a great promotion, which we'll get into in a little bit here. But let's get this first one out of the way. The introduction question: what got you into professional wrestling?
Oh man, so I was a very late bloomer to when it comes to American wrestling. Rather, I used to watch lucha libre when I was a kid, growing up in Los Angeles and then living in Mexico. I mean, obviously, lucha libre is a whole tradition; it's a whole religion down in Mexico. So growing up on that as a kid, I mean, it was that's what I knew. When we were up back here in the U.S., we didn't have a TV much, so we didn't dwell too much on the television side of things. So I kind of grew out of that for a little while. And then I started playing soccer at a very young age, at the age of 4. And I played soccer from like the age of 4 till like 12, 14. So I spent a good amount of time doing that. And then so I kind of went away from wrestling. And then it wasn't until around high school that I really started kind of getting back into it. And then so this is maybe like 2002, 3 maybe, where I started kind of getting back into wrestling and American wrestling. And then I'm lying, it was 2000, because it was the very first. This is what got me back into American wrestling. It was WrestleMania, and it was the TLC match with the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian, and the Dudley Boys. And it was this particular spot where Jeff Hardy was hanging from the titles, and then Edge speared him all the way down to the ring. And then that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, this is awesome. I want to do this. I had already been watching it on and off because I had a friend who his name is Rafael Romo. He was the only kid in our neighborhood who had a pool and a diving board. So we were always going over to his house to go swim in the pool. And he had this thing called a black box, which for the older folks, we may know what a black box is. That's what we used to use to not pay for the pay-per-views. So we used to always go to his house and watch whether the boxing or the wrestling. But at the time, I would only go because he had a pool with the diving board. So
He
that's actually how I
kind
ended
of
up
sucked,
getting.
but he had an
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, yeah. So he's a good dude. Thanks, Rafa. And
Yeah.
yeah, so then from there I just started getting into it, and then I got hooked, especially after that one moment. I got hooked. I started backyard wrestling. We don't condone it, but yeah, we started backyard wrestling in my backyard with my friend Kevin, and a couple of other friends around high school. And then afterwards, we just kind of I looked up just for poops and giggles, um, wrestling around the area, and then I found these guys who were also, it was a backyard fed, but they had a ring, they had a wrestling ring. So
Where
that
where where in the states are you located growing up and stuff
Los
like that?
Angeles,
Los
Los
Angeles.
Angeles,
Okay.
yeah, born and raised in Los Angeles. I kept going. I lived there for a little bit. I kept going back and forth. Los Angeles, lived in San Diego for a little bit, but all Southern California.
Yep.
So then yeah, so we found these guys who lived in the same city or the same valley that we did, and they were called BBWA EWA something. And so they had a boxing ring, and then so they were self-taught. I think there was only one guy that was somewhat trained, and then he would take whatever he learned at class for like a month, and then he would come and show us. But we would try and mimic whatever we would see at the time on Impact or TNA. That was the thing at the time, the X Division at the time. So we would mimic these matches. So we were self-teaching ourselves. Eventually, it got to a point where I went and I got trained. We used to do these backyard shows, and then a little side note: I was a graphic designer growing out of, or when I got my degree, I did a graphic design and animation. So I was doing these flyers that I thought they were pretty badass for backyard shows because I would take movie posters and I would mimic them. And then we would go to PWG and we would fly at PWG. Uh, so then eventually some of those guys actually ended up coming over to our backyard shows. And then once they realized it was a backyard, they would leave. But there was a few that ended up staying. And then one of those guys was a promoter named Joe Medina, who ran New Tradition Wrestling in Van Nuys, California, which is the city that I lived in. And he came to one of our training centers or one of our training nights, again training nights, quote unquote, right? A huge asterisk. And he's like, hey, how long does it take you guys to come up with the match? Because he wanted to see us wrestle, and then we didn't know any better, so I was like, oh, it takes about a month to come up with the match. So he just laughs. He's like, can you do one now? And then I was like, what? So I got one of my buddies who I had already wrestled like twice, and then we did a match that we had previously done, and full on with stupid head drops and stuff. So Joe's like, all right, that's cool. Hey, do you want to wrestle on Sunday? And then so yeah, so we did. He's like, I have this spot open if you want to wrestle. Um, so I was like, yeah, sure. So then we went and we kind of did like a little BS lucha match. Um, and then afterwards, he's like, hey, I like what you guys are doing, but I think you need training. If you want, we'll set something up. I have a trainer. He can get you going. Da 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 da. I was like, cool, yeah. So myself and a couple of my friends, we ended up going, and then I ended up getting training in lucha libre first by my trainer Latigo Blanco, and I owe him the world because for a good solid like 4 or 6 months, he just beat the living dog crap out of us. But oh man, I loved it, man. I loved it. He was so strict, and I loved it though. We got to learn the discipline aspect, the how to do things properly. The concept of all right, you did it once, all right, once is luck. Let's do it again and again and again and again. But I was so super happy for that. But it was straight lucha libre. So I started learning lucha libre, and I started working the lucha libre scene first before I switched over to once I got the blessing from him that I can go and train elsewhere. So then from there, I switched over. I started going to other places once I got his blessing. Um, and I started training with these guys named Los Luchas, Phoenix Star and MSS, who I think now they teach at Santino Brothers. So they're like the Lucha guys. And it was him. I mean, at the time, I think like Scorpio Sky every now and then would do it. So a lot of those guys. Once you look at what the scene was around the 2006 time frame, you'll see a lot of those guys are in AEW now.
Yeah.
So like I got to be around that area and then that time frame. So eventually I started working the American side. I started working a lot of amazing folks, the Young Bucks at a younger age, TJ Perkins, Scorpio. I think Scorpio just
Scorpio's so underrated, man.
so
He doesn't
underrated.
get nearly as much as he should.
And there was another guy that I mean he's retired now, but he was one of my favorites. His name is Scott Lost. If you ever get a chance, look him up on YouTube. Man, that guy was so awesome. But that's how eventually I started transitioning over to the American side. Was training with those guys, and I was super thankful that they were always willing to help me out. Um, and oftentimes they never asked for anything. They just
Yeah.
wanted, they just wanted me to give them my everything, as far as like all my energy, everything that I had, like no half-assing. So long as I committed to the program and then training, they were more than happy to help me out.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, real quick, for people who are watching this, because I do try to gear this to wrestling fans as well as non-pro wrestling fans. When you say the lucha libre and then the American style, what makes the difference between both styles when it comes to in-ring or the training or the behind-the-scenes things stuff?
I think there was a post not too long ago from Chris Hero where he kind of described it, and I'm trying to remember how he said it. But there's a lot of pageantry when it comes to lucha libre. It's a lot more. I feel it's a lot more athletic in the sense of there has to be. Um, it's a showmanship. It's this whole like artistry in how you move. The smoother, the better. Whereas in the American, it can be rugged, or even in the Japanese strong side, can be a little bit more rugged, and that's fine. But in the lucha, there it has to be a lot more finesse, your footwork, and then it's kind of awesome how even like smaller or even bigger guys, regardless of size, we can all fly, we can all catch, we can all because we have to learn the basing and how to control your body and then somebody else's. Um, I have to look up that, and I'm sure somebody is gonna find it once they see this. There's that again. Look up that quote from Chris Hero. It was super awesome, and how he described the American, the pageantry of lucha libre, and then like the drama of American. I think it was I forgot how he says the Japanese side, but it's
Yeah.
really cool the quote.
I think where the American audience really started to be like, what is this lucha libre and oh my god, this is something so vastly different. I give a lot of credit to the Monday Night Wars WCW cruiserweight division. That
Yeah,
cruiserweight division
and
put
even
that on the
before that,
map.
ECW. Even before that, ECW.
Yeah,
When they were
ECW was doing it. Yeah,
yeah, they were doing a lot, way before that. But that's
yeah,
what caught me because when I realized that the whole idea of these guys with the masks, with like the colors, and also that stems back from back in the day, Los Aztecas. All the tribes had their colors. All the tribes had their like their headgear. So that's their shield. That's their symbolism of them. Um, so that's also where like the mask comes from. That's why a lot of them are different because that's their personality. That's their them. That's their entity. Um, but yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so like ECW was great because they introduced that, and then I mean they were a little bit on the more down low than obviously the mainstay of WCW, and then eventually WWE. Um, but they all tried, but that's what got me hooked because that's what I loved growing up, and then that's when I realized like these guys to me are like the real life superheroes, and they're doing it in front of me, and then you have your good and your bad, you have your villains and your good guys. But that's what I loved about Lucha Libre was the colors, the mask, the capes, the flying, um, all of that. And I loved it. The personalities, the different characters, and that's what introduced me to Lucha Libre or slash wrestling. And then eventually I transitioned over to the American side
yeah.
of the drama.
Yeah, the drama, the hard hitting, I don't want to say the storytelling because the art of pro wrestling, their storytelling's there regardless of the culture and regardless of that. But growing up, who were some of your favorites that when you said the Edge and Christian moment were huge for you, but who were some of your idols or heroes watching growing up?
So growing again, I go back to it was Lucha Libre, right? So I would
Mm-hmm.
go to Octagon, Máscara Sagrada. At the time, there was Atlantis, Ultimo Dragon. There were so many of those guys that, um, yeah, yeah, there were so many of those guys that were influential to me. And then growing up, eventually too, like getting to meet them, and then eventually getting to work some of them, getting to wrestle them, that was awesome. And then once I started getting older, Rey Mysterio, Psychosis, La Parca. Juventud, right? Because those are the guys that I saw on TV.
Hoovy was awesome.
Oh, ooh, yeah. And and then I just saw him not too long ago, and he can still go. He can
Yeah.
still go, he can still move. And then Ray, obviously, Ray's Ray. There's never going to be another Rey Mysterio. I
Yeah.
got to work and wrestle with his uncle, the original Rey Mysterio, in my younger years. So I got to work with him, El Santo. I got to work with Mystico before he was before back when he was Mystico, before he was Sin Cara. I got to do stuff with him. I got to take those lashings from La Parca from his belt in the past. Which if you ever get a chance to look them up, La Parca is not very forgiving when he gives you those belt shots. But it was an experience, and I loved it, and I loved every single little bit of it.
Yeah, I love my favorite
the
part of that is when people transfer the name or the not so I don't want to say the character, but the name or the pageantry of a character. When one person steps away from it, the next person fills the shoes. I love that, and I feel like only really happens in the lucha libre scene where you have those people like Blue Demon, and then he just kind of like that's been passed on from multiple people or stuff like that. I think that's so cool, and they start doing that in Japan too with like the tiger masks and stuff like that, where multiple people donned it.
Yeah. Well, a lot of it has to do with the rights of them too. The Rey Mysterio passed it on to the original Rey Mysterio passed it on to his nephew, which is the one now. And then I know there's like a whole bunch of other ones, Hijo Rey Mysterio, and then El Príncipe de Hijo de Rey Mysterio, whatever. There's a whole lineup of them. And even La Parca, there was the original one, which Adolfo, and then there was like LA Park, who later became LA Park, and then there's La Parca that's still in AAA. But I think that's the second one because I think the other one passed away, unfortunately, like a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of them.
Ultimo Dragon is probably a bucket list for me.
I got to wrestle him back in November. And
I love the photo everyone refers to Ultimo Dragon where he has this 90 belts on him.
It was such a dream come true. I mean, that night though had a lot of controversy though, because there was a lot of issues with the promoter.
I've seen that, yeah.
And we debated because I mean it was myself, it was Alberto, and then Josh Alexander, and then it was Ultimo Dragon, Marufuji, and I feel so terrible. I forgot the third person's name. I'm sorry, but there was we all got there, and then the promoter just kind of just disappeared. So there was a lot of issues, but then after talking to Ultimo, and then a medium somewhere in there, we decided to not, to give the fans something. So we just did something in front of the audience and then gave them the match.
I will say this: I wasn't at the show, but from hearing from people, fans, and I will say smartened up people, who were maybe the boys that were kind of hanging out because they wanted to see you guys as performers, because that's a big card and that's big names that people want to see. There's matches where people say, we're gonna go in there, we're gonna phone it in, we're gonna do the basics. From everything I heard, all of even Ultimo Dragon, who's been doing it as long as he's been doing it, and Josh Alexander and all the guys put on bangers. They said it was a good match, it was, and doing it for peanuts at that point in time. You're doing it just for the love and for the fans.
I think honestly, once we got in there, we were like, and then we started feeling it. We're like, oh, we're going. But it was definitely an experience because two of the people that I grew up watching. I mean, Ultimo Dragon from my childhood, and then obviously Marufuji, which once I started wrestling, I started watching his matches, him, Kenta, Ishimori, Ricky Marvin, right? During that time frame of Noah. Dude, like that was amazing because how influential was Marufuji, right? We all do that mirror spot, and that's a Marufuji spot. We all do, the sliced bread. It's Marufuji. We all do like the fucking the Roman Reigns.
You're good. Cursing's fine.
All right, we do the Roman Reigns drive by. I used to do that to Roman Reigns when he was Leaki in FCW, and then but I got him.
Yeah.
So how influential was Marufuji? So to be in the ring with him and share with him, and then have a short conversation with him afterwards, and then understand obviously what was going on at the time with the promoter. And then we all kind of came together, and then we were like, we're here. We don't want to screw over the fans because it's not their fault.
Beautiful. It's a beautiful, because I think the fans didn't even understand what you guys put your bodies through, and what at any moment that could be you go in there, it could be it. You can get seriously injured. You can die. Like people have died in this industry, and to go in there and be like, hey, listen, we're people who have all hit major stages, have been in front of thousands and hundreds of thousands of people and millions of watching at home, and we're going to go in there and do this for free, but we're doing it because the love of the people in that audience and that arena. Let's just be honest, like it's a small indie promotion. There's maybe 100, 200 people, but it doesn't matter if it's 10,000 or if it's 200. People love this industry, and their story going forward can make or break a fan.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And then I think when I would think back of when I was a fan, because I didn't know about anything independence. All I knew was WWE. And then when I got out of high school, I started posting pictures of my backyard stuff, and I had one of my teachers on there, and he's like, "Hey, there's this company out here I think you'll like," and then he introduced me to PWG. And then one of the first matches that I saw was actually CM Punk against Super Dragon.
Yeah.
And then I think also on that card was like Samoa Joe and AJ Styles. I think
PWG was like the ROH of the West Coast. Like,
oh yeah. Oh, and I didn't know any better, so that's all I knew. I've known. And then, I was just losing my mind watching everything that they were doing. Chris Bosch was another one. Scott Lost, even Ronan. There were so many amazing folks in that. Hook Tall War. Human Tornado was another one too that just impressed the hell out of me.
I love what PWG does, but I also, from a fan standpoint who don't live there, hate it where everything is taped still. Like no streaming service, no. They're like, nope. If you want to watch it, go buy the tape, which is cool. But in today's day and age, where you pay like $10 a month and get everything, you're just like, come on.
It's America. I want it now.
Yeah, exactly. 100%. So after you did your training and you're going through everything, how does the transition happen where you make it to the WWE, or that phone call happens, or you're in that environment, and what is that experience like of being in a locker room with these just legendary people?
So at the time, I wasn't following WWE too much because of my work schedule. Again, I was a graphic designer, so I worked on salary. So we had a lot of projects, and then there was a lot of times where I wouldn't even really go home. I would just stay there, go to sleep in my car for like an hour or two, and then wake up and then go back to work because that was a workload. So I did a match at this company called Empire Wrestling Federation, EWF, and then the promoter Jesse Hernandez, he comes up to me after the match and he goes like, "Hey, WWE's coming into town in about a month or two, whatever. I think it was like 2 months. Would you be interested in doing a tryout?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." He's like, "All right, I'm gonna send you some information. They're looking for lucha guys, Latinos, da da da." I was like, "Cool." So then I started slowly kind of watching the product so I can kind of stay up to date, sort of. But I was terrible at it. And then I did the tryout. It was at the Staples Center. It was on August. It was the day after SummerSlam, August 2010. I did the tryout. We got there early. It was a whole bunch of us. We did like man in the middle drills. We did little like tournament style matches. Where they
any notable names trying out with you that day?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Let me see. I want to say Scorpio was there. Rusev was in it. Alex Kozlov was in it. Joey Ryan was in it. I'm trying to remember who else was in it. There was a couple more, but they were more like local guys that were sort of known. And so, like I said, they did a little trial where they would do like a tournament style matches, and they would pick whoever they liked from each one, and they just keep putting them up in the tournament. And at the end, it was myself and this one guy. He went by the name of Mercurio Jr. So we did the match. He goes over, da da da. We finished, and they pulled me aside afterwards. And the guy at the time, his name was Ty Bailey. So Ty Bailey pulls me aside and he asked me a couple questions. He was like, "Hey, are you under contract anywhere?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "Are you married? Do you have kids?" I was like, "No, not that I know of." And so he's like, "If given the opportunity, would you be willing to transfer to Florida?" I was like, "Yeah, I mean, but I always mention this, that I've been in wrestling long enough where I was promised the world and then nothing happens. So, yeah. So then,
you don't see it until you don't believe until you see it type deal.
Yeah. So then he goes like, "All right, cool, we'll stay in touch." I was like, "Awesome." So I go to catering and I go in, I stuff my face with food. and we stayed for Raw. That was Raw, so we were only scheduled for Raw, and then they went up to Jesse Hernandez, and then the lady, her name was Nicole. Nicole goes up to Jesse. He's like, "Hey, we're looking for this ring announcer guy for this thing that we're doing tomorrow. Do you have anybody?" And then Jesse just points at me, or he had pointed to somebody else first. He pointed to Mercurio, and for whatever reason, Mercurio said he couldn't make it the next day, right, for SmackDown. He could for whatever reason. So then they come up to me and they ask me, like, "Hey, have you ever done ring announcing before?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I've done ring announcing before," which I never have. And then they asked me, "Do you have a tuxedo?" I was like, "Sure," which I didn't. I went to the Salvation Army or the Goodwill, and I got a cheap suit from the Goodwill. And then I went to Bakersfield, California the next morning, and I did SmackDown. I did the whole spiel. Um, and then they were doing a double taping of SmackDown on that Tuesday and then Wednesday. So they asked me again the next day. So then I went. And then on that night afterwards, they pulled me, Rusev, and Alex Kozlov into the office. And then they offered us contracts.
That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So like, that was your first ever time doing ring announcing or anything like that?
Yep, just like that.
Just the grandest stage. You're just like, hey, you're doing it on. That's crazy.
Yeah, they just threw me into it. They just threw me in. And then the whole irony of this whole thing was when I was wrestling, I was a big fan of Super Dragon, Loki, Muda. So I didn't talk. I maybe cut one promo ever.
Wow.
I was mimicking. I wanted to be like Muda, Super Dragon, Loki, which ultimately, if you really compare them, it's the same person.
Yeah.
The same style. So that's what I wanted to be. So I never cut promos. And then the irony was I got put in a position to talk. And I got hired to talk. And
just fake it till you make it, man. Right place, right
oh,
time.
yeah,
Fake it till you make it. I love that. Oh man.
But also too, I had to put up with my own BS, and then I had to, show them that I was able to do it. And I got thankful that I did. And I did not know who Alberto was at the time. He looked familiar, but I didn't know who he was. So I hit up my friend who was like a super wrestling nerd. And then I was like, "Hey, who's this guy?" And he's like, "That's Dos Caras Jr." I was like, "No way." So then it all clicked in my head. And then I just kind of put all the pieces together of why he looked the way he did. And then I was like, I know him from somewhere. So I was like,
I always assimilated him. He was like, we talk about all the time where it's like, he was like the John Cena of the Mexican lucha libre scene. Like he was that rising guy.
Yeah. At the time it was him, Místico, Averno, Último Guerrero. Yeah, there was a couple guys in Rush wasn't there yet. Rush was on his way up at the time, but not quite. But at the time it was him, Rush, Wagner. I think Wagner was in CMLL. Either way, but point is, yeah. So like, I was like, that's awesome. And then obviously I knew who his uncle was and his dad was, in Máscaras and Dos Caras. So I knew who they were.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. And then so then they pulled me to the office. They asked me a couple questions. They do this whole like, all right, we're gonna send you to get your physicals and everything comes to your background check, and then we'll let you know. Do you want to go to TV next month in Boston? I was like, yeah, sure. So then that was my first time in Boston. I went to Boston. I did Raw, and then I started on the road. I was on the road ever since.
So were you just doing the ring announcing and then like commentary here and there?
No, I was just doing ring announcing for a good solid while. So I did the ring announcing for a little bit. And then as time went on, they started adding me to the live events. And then once I got the clearance from the physical and my background and all that stuff, they sent me to Florida to do developmental in FCW. But I started backwards. I started on the road first and then got sent to FCW. But by the time I was in FCW, I was already on the road. So I was never at training for FCW.
Yeah.
So I had a nice little deal with the developmental contract and then on the road contract for a good while, which was nice until Uncle Sam came around.
He's like, we'll take half that.
So I started backwards, and then and I was really only at FCW for like 2 days. Wednesdays, which was the days we would land from SmackDown, and then I was there for Thursday, and I would fly back out on Friday. So I was only home 2 days.
How is that travel? Like, just always been on the road, and like, is it tough? Like, or do you enjoy like just seeing everything all the time or seeing all the different cities?
As weird as it is, I honestly do feel because I got thrown into it. I wasn't like prepped for it. I just got thrown into it. It was overwhelming at first because there was a lot of going on. And I honestly do feel that the reason why they would call us WWE superstars is not because of what we do in the ring, because that's easy. It's the travel, the
Yeah.
constantly going, especially if you have a family, if you have kids, you're never home. There were so many times where we would, especially when Alberto and I first started, we got sent right to the top from the get go. So we were on everything. So there was a couple of times I wasn't home for like a whole month. Um, and at the time, I mean, my girlfriend, I mean, I was thankful that she was putting up with my BS of never being home. But um, yeah, I was never home for a good while. And if I was only home for a day or two, and I was back on the road. So and then like I said, I don't have kids, so I can only imagine for those that do. Um, so that I feel honestly is what made us superstars. It wasn't the in ring stuff because that's easy. It's the travel, and then obviously, I mean, putting up the face, the happy face when
Hmm.
you're bombarded at 5 in the morning by people wanting to get your autograph to sell them on eBay.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh, I hate when
so,
people wait outside the airport. I don't know. I can't. I'm not a fan of that.
yeah, but no, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, yeah,
But no,
yeah. That's.
the travel can be overwhelming. It definitely can, especially if you're not
I
used to it.
just traveled for the first time by myself alone out of the country, and it is stressful. It's terrifying.
Yeah, you were in England. Yeah, yeah.
I went to England. It was I never experienced, like, I literally, like, the craziest experiment I had was London to Germany and then Germany back to Pennsylvania, and my flight was delayed leaving London to go to Germany. And when we
Yeah.
landed in Germany, they're not like waiting for the other plane to get here. I
No,
had to
no, no.
sprint
Yep.
across the airport, Home Alone style. Like, I
Yep.
literally got to the gate just in time, and I'm like, can I just put deodorant on? I don't want to sit for 9 hours gross
But
next to somebody.
you know what though? Honestly though, I miss it. I miss that lifestyle, and I've been thankful that in the last couple of months or last year, I've been slowly getting back into that of the constant going on the go because I do miss it. I do miss being at the airports. I miss going to different places. I miss, in a sense, living off of a suitcase.
Yeah.
Um, because I got so accustomed to that. I did that for 5 years, and then I got to do that on and off for a little bit afterwards. But I miss that. I miss being on the go. I that's how I function. I function by being constantly on the moving, constantly on the go. That's how I go. That's how it motivates me. I can't be still. I have to keep moving.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that leads into all of this that's happening here.
Yeah.
So it's constant go, 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 go. Otherwise, the water gets stale and then it gets dirty.
Yeah, for me with the ADHD, it's nice to keep moving. When the 2 years I traveled just doing commentary between Jersey, New York, and PA, just eating
Mhm.
gas station food and always in the front seat of your car.
Yeah.
It's crazy, but it was, honestly, it was the most fun I had in 2 years. Just meeting new people and going from place to place. But when you get that opportunity and you're the ring announcer and you're bouncing back and forth, now obviously your mindset is like, I want to be a wrestler, I want to perform, I want to go do things. Was it hard to take that back seat? And I mean, obviously the checks are fun, you're getting WWE money and stuff like that, but like, mentally, is it like, well, this is, I wish I was in there mixing it up? Was it hard to take that back seat a little bit?
You know how hard it is to calm down your ego? Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. It's our
Yeah,
ego.
absolutely.
Not understanding, not knowing our role, not understanding why we're there. And then constantly telling ourselves like I am better than this. And sure, you probably are, but that's not what you're there for. Right? You're there to play a certain role. And obviously if you ever wanted to, you can. And people have in the past where you can take your ball and go home and go elsewhere, and that's totally fine. But you also have to be able to back it up. And then you have to make a wise choice when that happens. Some people can do it, other people can't. Um, but at first, honestly, it was hard. It was hard because I was watching everybody else wrestle, and then I couldn't wrestle. I wasn't allowed to wrestle. Well, at least I thought I wasn't allowed to wrestle. Um, so little by little, I started getting in the ring before Raw and SmackDown, and I was always the first one in the ring. And then,
Like, I
but
hope
so
someone's watching.
yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the monitor is yeah. There's always a TV on. The hard cam's always on. So Vince is in the back watching. If he's in the office, he's that the TV's on, and I know that because I've been in his office and that TV's on, and it's watching the ring. Um, but even then, like it was just more so me just getting in the ring, just doing a couple rolls, a couple bombs, running the ropes. just for me, just to get in there. And then oftentimes, if there was an extra that I knew who he was, I would tell him, "Hey, get in the ring. Let's roll around." That way, they can see you, and they can see me too, and then I can just get this itch out. And then as time went on, they started knowing, and they started realizing that, hey, I know a thing or two. And that's when those spots started coming in, where they started letting me get more involved. And then because they knew my timing was better,
Mm-hmm.
was decent, and then my selling, my whatever. But the whole thing was always like, you're not a wrestler, so don't necessarily sell like a wrestler, but also don't fight like a wrestler. So finding that happy medium was interesting. But I was super happy afterwards. Once I accepted what my role was, dude, I had such a blast.
Yeah.
Uh, but it was overwhelming at first because I had to calm down my ego, um, and that's a tough one.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Like that was the biggest thing, just meeting you. And actually, like the first time, like around the time when you were in WWE, I wasn't watching at the time. That's when I was like on my hiatus because it was like wrestling wasn't cool anymore type deal. So I'm like slowly catching back up to that era. But like seeing you, and I knew exactly, like I knew of wrestling, I knew what was going on, but I just didn't watch week to week. And then seeing you perform, I was like, yo, this guy's good. Like he's like very talented. Like that was a ring announcer. Like, and then like just kind of learning the business and being part of it. And sometimes you just don't get put in a situation you think you should be in. And like they said, that you have to kill your ego to kind of do what needs to be done. And I'm glad you kind of answered that way, because I want to transition now to now you're starting your own wrestling promotion. How did that come about? How did you land Lancaster, and why start Three Legacies Wrestling at this point in time in your
So
life?
in WWE, I was sort of unofficially I was used as to help out others a lot. So as because at some point they trusted me to work with people. So when guys would come up from NXT or FCW, they would put them in the ring with me just before the shows, just to move them around. And then I started working with Will and Regal directly next to him. So if like Regal was the one in charge of the extra, so Regal will, and then a lot of guys, if they watch this, um, can vouch for it. That Regal was a guy they would go to because Regal would give him the speech on Monday, and then half the time they'll probably get in the ring on Tuesdays, and I was usually there with Regal, and it was always the similar speech, so I kind of learned that speech, what they were looking for, what they needed, da 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 da, at the time. Um, and yeah, so then if there was somebody who was either an odd man out, Regal would be like, "Hey, get in the ring with them." Or if there was somebody in particular that Regal liked, he would tell me, "Hey, get in the ring with them. Just move them around." Because the whole thing was, do they listen? So that's where I started learning how to call stuff on the fly. Because yeah, that's what we would do. I was like, all right, because I got to wrestle with some folks who were like relatively top indie guys, and I would call stuff to them, and then they would hesitate because they weren't used to just calling in the ring. They had to plan out everything, and yeah, so that was a, even for me, it was a big eye awakening uh, thing, because I didn't realize that. I in my head I figured everybody knew how to call in the ring. I didn't know any better. Um, so yeah, so I got to learn that whole aspect of how to just slow the fuck down, and just, yeah, relax. But yeah, so I got put into that position. Also, I was helping out with the girls. The girls were like come up to approach me quite a bit, and then they wanted to try something, especially because they knew that I came from lucha-esque background. So they wanted to try stuff out. So I would get in there, I would move around. I used to love working with Naomi, Trinity. Um,
She's
and
killing
I
it now. Killing it.
Oh, yeah. And then I used to get in the ring with her, and then she would always come in and smile and say like, "Hey, friend, teach me something." So then I started showing her like Manami Toyota and like the girls from Yoshi, the Yoshi girls from like back in like the mid late 90s, early 2000s. And I was like, watch that stuff, whatever you like, record on your phone, and then bring it next week, and we'll do it. Because then she would try and explain to me, and I wouldn't understand what she was trying to get to. I was like, just record on your phone, and then come and bring it next week. So she would do that. So like that little split legged thing that she does, where she like jumps over the rope, like that's something that we did.
That's
There's
so
a lot
cool.
of stuff. Yeah, yeah. So like her, Alicia Fox was another one I used to love working with.
I'm excited that she's back on the indie scene doing stuff. Like I hope she makes her way around. I'm a fan of her.
Oh yeah, and she's awesome too. And then Natalia was another one I used to love rolling around with her. So we would just go and we just grapple and just move around, and it
How
was
is it
fun.
to roll around with a Heart Dungeon girl?
Oh, she's awesome. She is super awesome. And then she would get competitive though. She would really get competitive. I loved it though. There was legit one time, and then I brought it up to her. Not too long ago, brought it up to her. How like we were rolling around and we were just going. We were like pinning, pin, and then we separate, and then we stare at each other, and then she just slaps the fuck out of me. Uh,
She
and then
has that heart eyes. Like you could tell
oh
she's not.
yeah, and she just slaps me, and then she takes a second, and I guess she realized what she did, and she just like, oh my god, I'm so sorry, and she hugs me. I was like, what just happened?
Who are some people you got to work with early that you were like they're gonna be something because you got to those early stages of them or maybe like watching them develop or where they have struggled top indie guys and then they became what we see now on TV? Is there anyone that you got to maybe see before the rest of the world got to see their greatness?
Roman. I was one of those guys. There was a few of us that were, I don't want to say assigned, but we were assigned to Roman when he was first coming up, when he was first really starting to get going in FCW. His name was Leaki at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of those matches on YouTube of Ricardo and then Leaki. So our job was to move him around, was to guide him, to kind of work with him. So I got to do that quite a bit. There was a couple of other guys that got to do that too. Um, I mean, I got to work with a lot of awesome. Xavier Woods was another one I got to work with a lot. He was one of my favorites. Um, early on, I mean, I used to get in with Titus O'Neil quite a bit. Dango, I used to get in with him a lot. That was a lot of fun. The Usos, um, yeah, I used to get in with them a lot. Like I said, Alicia, Naomi, the Trinity, Natalia. So yeah, so there was a lot of them.
That's awesome. Well, listen, that is the greatest plug and endorsement of why people should be not only look at Three Legacies, but your wrestling school now. You got to mix up with those people. You've been to the dance. You've shoulder to shoulder with William Regal and helping develop talent that becomes the Roman Reigns, the Naomis, the Trinities, the Natalias of the world. How did you start this school and this wrestling promotion, and had you land in Lancaster, Pennsylvania?
So I've been very open about like my addiction problems. I've been very open. I had heavy alcohol and then drug addiction for years. Um, and then I ended up here because I ended up going to a rehab center here, Blueprints for Addiction Recovery. And I had a great, I learned a lot. When I got out, I realized I kind of needed to slow down because I was living very fast. I was constantly on the go, but I didn't know how to manage it. I was constantly getting my head, but I didn't know how to deal with it. So I had to learn how to handle that, how to handle my thoughts, how to handle everything that was going on in between these 2 years. It was getting overwhelming, but I didn't know how to slow it down. And I realized too that anytime I would get upset or depressed or mad, I would always run to the bottle, and that was my escape. And I learned that that's not how we should manage things because that's one thing that is going to overtake you and it's going to overpower you, and you're not going to get anything good out of it. Um, and yeah, so when I got out, I was talking to my business partner, Christopher Dreisbach, and I had the privilege of running and operating many schools around, literally around the world, in Mexico, in Texas, in Florida, in Los Angeles, in England, in Germany, and oh, maybe not Germany. I didn't run it. Um, in India, I got to spend a whole year in Cairo, Egypt, and I got to run these schools, but none of them were ever mine. So then when I was showing my story to Christopher, he's like, "Well, why don't you just open your own thing?" And then it just kind of came from there. So I was like, "All right, yeah, all right." So I need to slow down first of all. I need to establish a base, a home base, which I was constantly on the go. Ever since I left WWE, I was constantly on the go between all the different schools, all the different countries that I was living in, not just visiting, but living. I was constantly on the go, and I never established a home base anywhere. I was always moving, and I never had anything for myself. Which if you look at it from perspective of I get to travel a lot, awesome, all right, but eventually this thing's gonna have to stop one day, and where am I gonna go? I have nothing. I haven't built anything anywhere for myself. So so yeah, so I ended up here. This is a year and a half ago. I've been in the program for a year and a half now of sobriety, and then I do a lot of community events.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. I get to do a lot of that, and then between myself and then through Legacies Wrestling, we get to do a lot with that community, as far as like the city of Lancaster, the community of recovery and sobriety, um, and we get to offer and give back to the community, which ultimately that's what all this is about. It's not just me giving back into wrestling, but it's also giving back to the community that gave me so much. So it's my way of saying thank you to the
Yeah,
community,
well,
and then also to the
well,
industry.
I'm very appreciative you found it. Just from a wrestling scene, and I've worked with a lot of promotions and seen what promotions can do, and talent coming in and talent coming out, and talking to the boys. I've been very fortunate enough to make friends with a lot of people in the business. Um, People talk. Obviously, you know what promotions you're like, oh, you can go to and you maybe not go to and stuff like that. I've never heard a bad thing about Three Legacies. Everything about what you're doing there, that I've never had a talent come back and say anything negative at all. And that's coming from talent. That's coming from production. That's coming from because most of the people you have there, I'm very good friends with, and everyone has nothing but positive things to say. And I mean, every show, man, photos of shows, you guys are packing it out. You're putting good shows together. The people are responding to it. The talent that you're working with is good talent. It's just, I'm excited for it. And now you have the school and you're just bringing that next generation up. It's really exciting.
It's been a blessing. It's not easy by any means. Don't get me wrong. This is not easy
Yeah.
at all. Anybody that's ever owned a business, especially when the first year, even 2 years, man, it's a constant hustle. And it doesn't end ever. I think a lot of people get a little success and they get complacent, and that's a very dangerous area to be in, not just in business, but in personal growth, because you don't want to be complacent. The moment you realize, all right, I'm good, then yeah, you've lost. So complacency is
Yeah.
never a good thing. So same thing with this. There has to be some sort of ambition. There has to be some sort of drive that has to push you forward. Not just you, but also whatever your brand is and you're supporting. So my brand is Three Legacies. My brand is me, myself, and then now including my students, my product, the wrestlers that are underneath me, in working with me. We are all a team together, and we all have to push forward. And this is never an individual project ever. I've heard in the past too that sometimes owners or promoters, it's about them, and it's not. It's about the product. It's about the boys, the girls, the production. It's a whole team that moves forward, because you're only going to be as fast as your slowest member. But if you can drag and take everybody with you, I think everybody will succeed.
Yeah, and
But
you're absolutely nailing that. Just from I never stepped in front of your doors. I've never been in your school. I've never been to one of your shows. But what you just described it pretty much nails exactly. You're accomplishing that. From everyone I talk to, you are 100% accomplishing that. Everyone feels like they're part of the team. Everyone feels like they're just as valuable as anybody else, and that's not an easy thing to do from a wrestling company standpoint.
And I understand. I mean, I understand. Not everybody's gonna be happy with certain things. I get it. I get it, because you're never gonna make everybody happy.
Yeah.
But it does come from a good place in the heart, and then obviously we want to push forward and progress, and then take everybody with me. I want to take everybody with me on this journey. Um, do I know exactly where I'm going? Nope, but I have an idea. I have an idea where I want to go and where I want to take this, and I want to take as many people with me as possible. I've had the privilege of, as we mentioned prior, I've been to the top, thankfully, and I've been to manias, Pearl. I know that feeling. I know what it's like to be on those trucks. I know what it's like to be, in WWE pay-per-views. I know that feeling. And I wish that upon everybody, because it's such an amazing feeling. But if I can help other people accomplish that and guide them through the process, because they're going to learn a lot of lessons, and I don't want them to learn them alone. I've been through a lot, and I made a lot of mistakes because my ego got to me, because my head got to me, and I didn't know how to manage it, and I didn't have anybody, or at least I didn't think I had anybody there to help me. And I
Yeah.
wish I had some sort of mentor. I wish I had somebody in my ear to tell me, "Hey, you're fucking up. Uh, don't do that."
Yeah.
um, and I'm able to give that to other people now. So if
Yeah,
I can
the
guide and
show
help other
aspect is the
people,
easy part, man. Is the small things in the business that people aren't aware of, is the things that break you down.
it's a hustle. It's a hustle. Like it's this is I I tell all these guys a lot too when they come in here. You're not only going to grow as a performer, but you're also going to grow as a person.
So true.
because we're gonna develop a lot of mental strength. Because ultimately, that this does eat you up. It does eat at your mental health. It's not easy at all. There's so many times where I wanted to quit, and then I was so depressed, and I wanted to quit. And I know these guys sometimes when their bodies are hurt, when something doesn't go their way, and I can see their frustrations when they're trying to do something, it doesn't come out right. It happened tonight, right? One of the guys, he just wasn't getting something correctly, and then I could see that frustration. I was like, hey, slow it down. It's all right. We'll walk through the steps. We'll get it. We'll get it. Just don't give up on yourself. Whatever is that is going on in your head, throw it away. We'll get it. We'll get it done. And it's just a matter of repetitions and cleaning whatever it is that you just did and fix it, and we'll be fine. But don't eat at yourself. You can be critical on yourself, sure, but don't let it get to you.
Where do the name Three Legacies come from? What does it represent?
So a lot of it comes from it's a whole mixture of different things, and it's the irony of how life happens. Because also I'm not living life on my terms. I'm living my life on life's terms. My indie name was Chimera. A chimera is a three-beast animal of Greek mythology. So it's a serpent, a goat, and a lion. Also, I wanted to incorporate the whole idea of body, mind, and spirit. I wanted to incorporate the idea of basically Asia, North America, Europe, and then just so happens it's also from recovery, from sobriety. That's all that logo on Three Legacies. That's a hand symbol that I used to do on the Indies before WWE. So
I love that. I love that so much. I do have some questions here from our Discord. Hunter, our backstage producer as well, says, "What is the funniest moment or story you can recall from your time in WWE?"
Oh man, there's a lot of them I can't share. I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but there's a lot of them that when we're in person, I'll tell you.
Okay. One of my favorite two people I got to hear backstage WWE stories, and I'm not going to tell them. I'll just tell you the two people who were talking, and I'm sure you can fill in the blanks. Was Lindsay Dorado and Brian Kendrick. Their stories of talking about their hilarious.
Oh yeah, they're
the two funniest people I've ever met in this business, I think.
Yeah, there's so much stuff that we did that I can't put it out there. Eventually, one day once I'm older and I write that book, and then they're not on TV anymore. Yeah.
Well, listen. I know a podcast, so you can tell if anytime you want to open up, I'm always here for you. If you can go back and wrestle any current WWE superstar, who would it be? And that's from our boy DM from the Discord.
Any current WWE superstar? Oh, Chad Gable right now. I love everything that Chad Gable's doing.
Yeah.
I don't think I could. I'll be honest. I don't think I could hang. But Chad, for the sake of Naomi.
Yeah.
No. Natalia.
Yeah.
I would wrestle. Yeah, I would definitely wrestle Natalia.
Who I want to add to that real quick. Who is someone that you wrestle that there's being TV good wrestling, or when the machine's behind somebody and making them who they are, and then the people like for a while. Chad's always been fantastic, but they never really gave him the light to showcase that. Who is someone that you wrestled or worked with behind those scenes that you're just like, this person is a mega star, but maybe they're not being used properly?
Woods.
Xavier, yeah,
he was my favorite to wrestle in FCW, because there was a few times that we wrestled, and then I knew at the time, again, I got away with a lot of stuff early on because we were main event from the get-go, right? So when I was down in FCW, I got to wrestle Woods, I think 2 or 3 times. And then I told him, I was like, dude, I just want to indie this thing up because I just want to make sure I can still go. And then he's like, I was like, dude, I'll take the heat. Don't worry. I'll take the blame. So sure enough, like we did it once in Orlando at an armory. We get to the back and Norman Smiley just goes, what was that? I was like, I'm so sorry. And I was just apologizing. I love Norman. I did this little sidewalk into a cutter. And then he's like, "That's you did RKO." I was like, "Well, again, me, my ego." It's like, and I knew we were gonna get in trouble. I knew we were gonna get, shame on you. I knew that was gonna happen at the end, but I was like, "It's okay. I'll take the heat for it," because at the time they were not gonna tell me anything. But yeah, Woods was probably one of my favorites to wrestle.
The WWE style is something I think that a lot of people, the smart fans who watch casually, and then the smart fans will definitely know the difference. But one of the stories I've ever heard that it involves Natalya is during the pandemic era, Natalya and Shayna Baszler went out and had a match.
Mm-hmm.
And to them, Shayna thought she killed it. And imagine Shayna Baszler and Natalya going out and having a match that they put together. They hit the curtain, and Vince is like, go back out and do it again. I hated it.
Yeah.
It's not our style of wrestling. And then they go back out, and Natalya's like, just follow me. I got you. And they put together a match, which was fine. But you kind of have that restrictor plate on you. You know what I mean?
So here's something that I didn't understand until much later. And you know how many times these guys wrestle a week, right? So we're going for longevity here. You're also a very important part of the company, of the industry. If you go and you kill yourself, you indie it up every night for 5 days a week, you're not going to last long. And that's what I don't think people realize, that we're wrestling 5 days a week. And then we don't have off season, right? Wrestlers don't have off season. If you don't work, you don't get paid. Well, you still get your salary, but you get taken off TV. So you want to go for longevity here. I want to still be able to get up and then go and do whatever I have to do the next morning. I don't want to have to go and wrestle and then destroy myself for 5 days straight and then barely be able to move by the second week. Right. So a lot of these guys on the independents don't realize there is a different show, and I get it. You want to show off, do your thing. I totally get that. But the WWE style is also a lot more. It's first of all, it's TV. Is drama induced. We work for moments. We don't work for spots. We work for moments, because ultimately that's what more people are going to remember. I'll put it this way. Do you remember the entire match of Ric Flair and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania?
Nope.
What do you remember?
I'm sorry. I love you.
Right. That's all I remember.
Yep.
Right. Do you remember the match between Brock Lesnar and Undertaker at WrestleMania 30?
I remember certain spots, but the ending is what you talk about.
Right.
The crowd reaction. Yeah.
Right. So we work for moments.
Mm-hmm.
And sure, I mean the moves help this whole process. The moves help because that's how that's our color when we're painting the canvas. Right. Those are the colors, the brush strokes, all that. But we work for moments, and ultimately that's what people are going to remember. Now those moments can come in the form of moves. Sure, obviously you're Jeff Hardy, right? You got the Swanton.
You're Snuka off the cage. You're gonna have
You're Shane. Yeah, but if they had done 1,000 things and then just like randomly just gotten up and then done it, it wouldn't have gotten the same reaction instead of like a build up.
Mm-hmm. It's literally watching the AEW product versus WWE product. They're both amazing, but they're clearly two different products. Yeah,
absolutely. And to each their own, right? I think Triple H said it best. When he goes, "It's all ice cream. It's different flavors, but it's all ice cream."
Anthony Green said, "Wrestling is the Muppet Show. Everyone has their place. You could be funny, you could be comical, you can do old school, you can do new school. It's all the Muppet Show." Another question here: What is the most enjoyable experience you had in pro wrestling as a whole? What's one that stands out for you?
There's too many. I mean, my first time in front of the crowd at SmackDown in Bakersfield, California. My first WrestleMania at the Georgia Dome in Atlanta. My last WrestleMania where I was doing commentary, the Spanish commentary at WrestleMania 30, when I was there when Daniel Bryan beat Batista and Randy. Or was it? Yeah. I was there when Taker lost to Brock Lesnar. I was there for that moment. I was doing commentary for that moment.
That's sick. As a commentary guy, that's so sick.
being in what I still think is Bret Hart's last TV match. It was myself and Alberto in Calgary, Ontario. I think Calgary. It was myself and Alberto versus John Cena and Bret Hart. And I still think that's his last TV match. Wrestling in Madison Square Garden multiple times.
Still have not been there.
Yeah, in Baltimore, Maryland, at TLC, I got thrown off a ladder by CM Punk and The Miz. I ran over. We killed Santa. In wrestling, I had so many moments. It's hard to pick one. And then ultimately, at the same time, though, was that experience of being in front of the audience and then learning so much and then sitting under the learning tree of not just Triple H, Vince McMahon, being getting invited into the office and then just chit chatting and shooting the shit with Vince, getting on the jet with Vince because we have something in the next morning. Um, yeah, it's like there's so many awesome experiences, and then there's a
I
lot
have
of it.
such bad imposter syndrome. My imposter syndrome would be so bad. Like, what am I doing? They're gonna figure it out soon.
Getting pulled into the office and then getting yelled at for some stupid I did in Europe. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of moments. There's too many moments, but for different reasons.
Yeah. If you can go and work anyone, and this is another one from Raz, anyone in pro wrestling history that you haven't worked, that's like a bucket list, alive or we'll say alive or no longer with us, who would it be?
Well, Eddie would have been. Yeah, Eddie Guerrero would have been it.
Eddie and Owen, I think, are everyone's like.
Yeah.
They would love to mix it up with. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
Absolutely.
Listen. I have one last question personally from you that I want to ask more on the independent scene. Just from what you've been doing with the 30 Legacies or student wise or just talent you've brought into your company, who are some people that you have brought into your company that people should be aware of or be looking out for that you think have that it factor right now?
There's a lot of guys that I do feel that have a ton of potential and they just need a platform to be able to perform and to be seen. I know I may not have the largest of platforms, but I do know that I have a platform. I do know that I still have some. I mean, my Twitter X, my Twitter, my Instagram, my Facebook. I can still push the people that I'm able to, and it may not be at the amazing major scale of like a million followers, but still it's plentiful. And obviously, I have these people on my roster for a reason because I do believe in them and I do believe that they're capable and they have a lot of potential. So just, I mean, to name a few, obviously my first ever champion, Bro Keller.
Love Bro.
Yeah,
Love
he's
Bro.
awesome. Tarzan Duran, Smiley. These are all guys that I mean, they were my picks for to be showcased at the Premier Showcase on Saturday. Uh, and they killed it. They did an amazing job. Obviously, I have my students. I have one who's 6'8", Clayton Adams, 24 years old, jacked as shit, um, and he's phenomenal. And he's still young, and he has a lot of potential behind him. Zoe Cannon is another one that I feel has a lot of potential. I have people from the outside that still come in. Journey Burke. Harleen Lopez and Prince Baran.
Journey and Harleen are going to be awesome.
Oh, yeah.
They're so young in their career and doing things they shouldn't be doing at this point in time. They're so talented.
We just need more time and more exposure, and then they'll get there. But this is also what I tell a lot of folks: is don't rush it.
Mm-hmm.
Be patient.
You have one guy that you use in your roster that is not only a dear friend to me and such a great human being in this business, and his head's in such a good spot, but he's someone that you can have do ring announcing, commentary, anything. He literally is a utility player, but he's such a character too. I am such
Hawthorne.
a JS Hawthorne fan. Yes,
Hawthorne. Hawthorne.
Oh, yeah. I wish I would have been able to see his moment at the Rumble.
What I admired about him because he came to our shows months ago to help out, just to help out. So he was there lugging those posts and then that wood, and he kept showing up. So there's also a lesson for folks out there. He kept showing up, and he came to our training one day, and then I needed somebody for the dark match. He was there, and then and then it just went from there, and then just kind of gained that vibe from him. This is where my hippie side comes in because I'm a big fan of energy and vibes. That's my hippie side of me.
Yeah.
And I got a good energy from him, and I mean I'm thankful for him, and yeah, so like I was happy that he won the Rumble, and there's gonna be a lot of potential going into that with him versus Bro Keller.
I can't wait. That's a matchup I can't wait to watch. Where can people watch if they're not local or they're not from the area? Where can they watch Three Legacies Wrestling?
So they can always check us out on Premier Streaming Network. That's owned by Fred Prinze Jr. That one. And then you can also follow us on Facebook at Three Legacies Wrestling. You can follow us as well on Instagram at 3L Wrestling, or on a YouTube. Just type in Three Legacies Wrestling, and then they can just go from there. But all of it is centralized on either our website, Three Legs is Wrestling, or our Facebook, Three Legs is Wrestling.
Beautiful.
If you're in the area.
Awesome. And then we have our sponsored question from Logos by Hunter. He helps me out so much with awesome logos for our podcast, for good merchandise. So you can always check it out in the links below. His question is, if you could write a letter to a younger Ricardo Rodriguez, what would that letter say?
Oh, man. Take your time. Breathe. Take your time and breathe. Yeah, take your time for breathe. And then if you ever need help, ask for it.
Yeah. I love that, man.
That makes sense but for a lot of folks that struggle with mental health, ask for help.
Yep. You're doing amazing things. I really want you to know that. I know I've told you that before. That's not just because you're on the podcast. I would have told you that in person if I wouldn't. I'm going through a lot now, but I do plan on being involved more on the scene and going to shows again. But very proud of what you're doing. I think the biggest thing for you, man, is just right place, right time. If people are listening to this episode back of what you could do in any industry you're in, and just second chances are important. You know what I mean? And I think your second chance here is not only good for you as a human being, but it's good for the people that are around you, and you're growing people. I'm telling you, man, you're not just growing, you're growing people from the production team of the music guy, you're the commentary team, your ring announcers, your people that are there to make content, your professional wrestlers, your referees, everyone's being elevated because of what you bring to the table and what you've learned in your first run at this, and your second chance of where you might have been at your lowest, but you're coming back on that second rebound, and you're doing good things, man. And I really appreciate you. And I'm glad you're in the Northeast PA scene.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Awesome, man. Well, listen, everyone, check out the links below for all things Ricardo, as well as Three Legacy Wrestlings. Please support them. Subscribe to the Legacy, the Premier Network. Freddie Prinze Jr. is a good dude, man. He killed it in Scooby-Doo.
Go buy our shirts over at Pro Wrestling Tees.
Yes, buy t-shirts, buy merchandise, support people in their art. Ricardo, thank you so much for doing this again. It means the world. I hope you had a good time here on the ABJ podcast. This door is always open if you have anything you would ever want to put over, any talent, anyone on your roster, or any students that want to come through. I love hearing people's stories and giving them a platform to talk. We'll see you guys next time on episode 87. For now, we'll see you guys soon. Here's some music by the Converse Kid Billy Trey. We're out of here.